we take time to take a look at Bible prophecy. And when we do, we look primarily at Israel, the nation Israel, because as it's been said, it is God's prophetic clock. If you want to know what time it is, on God's prophetic clock, you have to look no further than the nation Israel to find out. And so as we look at Israel, especially with what's taking place recently with the elections for prime minister, not president, but prime minister that took place last month. For a couple of weeks, we've been examining the prophetic significance of the elections in Israel for prime minister. It was the closest race in the history of the reborn nation of Israel since 1948. And because of the closeness of the race, Shimon Peres chose Benjamin Netanyahu to be the prime minister. Now it's up to him, incumbent on him, to form a new government. He has a certain amount of time to do it. Likely he will. Now, last week we looked at one of 4 of the prophetic possibilities that I believe could find their fulfillment with a newly elected Netanyahu government. Now, we talked about this last week a little bit. There was a prophecy by a Calvary Chapel pastor. It was a word of knowledge or a prophetic word that Benjamin Netanyahu would once again become the prime minister of Israel. And this has seemingly now come to pass. The prayer is, the hope is, that he learned his lesson from the last time that he was prime minister and tried to unsuccessfully with one Yasser Arafat and also one Bill Clinton, then president of the United States. He tried to mess with Jerusalem. When I read the scriptures, I find one common theme, and that is, don't mess with Jerusalem. If you do, it will be a big boo-boo. And it was for him, as well as all the other prime ministers after him who tried to divide Jerusalem. I was reading some news articles this last week. There are some who are thinking that Netanyahu will cave. Once again, under pressure, especially with an Obama administration. He will acquiesce once again and try to mess once again with Jerusalem. The first one of these prophetic possibilities that we looked at last week was that a newly formed Netanyahu government creates an enormous vacuum for a world leader to bring peace to the Middle East. See, what's going to happen now on the heels of a Netanyahu prime minister in Israel is that he will not be able to bring about a peace between the Jews and the so-called Palestinians. He will not succeed. Now, how can I be so emphatic and even dogmatic about that? Because the Bible says that he will not. The Bible says that the only one who will be able to bring a peace, as it were, will be this man of peace, not Jesus Christ, but the Antichrist. And he will confirm a covenant according to Daniel's prophecy, chapter 9, verse 27, with the Jews and the world for a 7-year period of time, which we know as the time, as the Bible calls it, of Jacob's trouble. So that is the 7-year tribulation. So that's the first prophetic possibility that we looked at. And it finds its fulfillment, I believe, not only in Netanyahu being the new prime minister of Israel, but it also is in concert with Barack Obama being the new president of the United States of America. Barack Obama is by any stretch of the imagination dovish, for lack of a better way of saying it, as they say it. And Netanyahu has a reputation for being hawkish. So therein lies the problem. I think that we will see, as it's being reported, that Israel will have to go it alone. And that's, by the way, what the Bible says, is that there will come a point where it will be Israel against the world. And the United States of America will not support or stand with Israel. They will not, we as Americans will not bless Israel. And the consequence of that, well, read Genesis 12, 12:2 and 12:3. The problem is, I think we're already in that. We are experiencing now the consequences of turning our back on Israel. The second prophetic possibility is this. It, speaking of a Netanyahu government, along with the U.S. election of Obama, emboldens Syria, whose goal is to take Lebanon and destroy Israel. This report from the Daily Star from Lebanon, which is my birthplace, by the way, I was born in Beirut, Lebanon, had this article with the headline reading, "An Election That Raises Syria's Appetite." Now listen to this article. This is really quite profound to me. It further reinforces the disenchantment that will come not only in the U.S. with Obama, but in Israel with Netanyahu. Listen to the wording now. "Leave it to the Israelis and Palestinians to extinguish the heavenly light that accompanied Barack Obama into the White House." Oh, really? Oh, it gets better. The American president, we were told, would take the sins of the Middle East onto his mortal shoulders and usher in a new morning of regional concord. Apparently not. Delighted with the Israeli election results is Syria. As he surveys the wasteland of Oslo, the president Bashar Assad sees his stock rising. That's why it's urgent for the Obama administration to make public its new policy toward Syria. On that end, by the way, he did send Senator John Kerry. Remember him? To Syria to meet with Bashar Assad. Pray. Anyway, the article goes on to say, that's why it's urgent for the Obama administration to make public its new policy towards Syria, but it's Lebanon where Syria's eye wanders most lustily. One writer, Sami Mobayed, who accurately reflects the Assad regime's thinking, let the cat out of the bag recently when he wrote that the Syrians want to show the world, mainly in the U.S., that just as they can deliver on Palestine, they can deliver in Iraq and Lebanon. In light of the Israeli election results, the Obama administration has its plate full in finding a way through the inveterate stalemate of the region. Before long, it may conclude that the pickings are so slim that Arabs and Israelis merit only Last Suppers. Listen, this is exactly what the Bible says with respect to and in regards to Syria, which I believe heretofore has flown sort of below the radar because the world's attention is focused on Iran. Make no mistake about it. Iran and Syria are very chummy, but there are prophecies related to both. There is a prophecy related to Syria, and it's quite intense, quite frankly, as we'll look at here in a moment. It describes how Syria will launch an offensive, resulting in them being obliterated. I like that word, obliterated. It's not what the Bible uses. The Bible uses another word, but I kind of like obliterated. It's one of those words that sounds like what it means, obliterated, just kind of the word obliterate, obliterates. Anyway, enough of that. Listen to these headlines regarding Syria recently. Defense chiefs urge hawk Netanyahu to strike deal with Syria. Why? Syria is setting up a chemical weapons plant from this report. How about this headline? New uranium traces found at suspected Syria nuclear site. This one, IAEA chief frustrated by evasions of Iran and Syria.